Hey there, Pastor Dan Schmidt here, and thank you for joining me for this next lesson to get us ready for our upcoming Catechism class. Today we're continuing looking at the Apostles' Creed, specifically looking at the work of God the Father, his work that we call preservation. So if you remember the first article of the Apostles' Creed, it says, I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. And then in Luther's explanation of this part of the creed, he said, I believe that God created me and all that exists, and that he gave me my body and soul, eyes, ears, and all my members, my mind, and all my abilities. We looked at that last time as we looked at Genesis chapter 1 and 2 and talked about things in class. Today, we are looking at the rest of what Martin Luther said about this, where he wrote, and I believe that God still preserves me by richly and daily providing clothing and shoes, food and drink, property and home, spouse and children, land, cattle, and all I own and all I need to keep my body in life. God also preserves me by defending me against all danger, guarding and protecting me from all evil. All this God does only because he is my good and merciful Father in heaven, and not because I have earned or deserved it. For all this I ought to thank and praise, to serve and obey him. This is most certainly true. Now in this video, we're not going to unpack all of those things. There's a lot to cover there. But we are going to look at is Exodus chapter 16 to help us at least start thinking about how God preserves and cares for his people. And as we're always going to do in these videos, is we are going to look at who are the characters that we encounter here, when and where did these things happen, what is the problem or problems that we encounter, how are those problems resolved, if they're resolved at all, and then what are some of the most important details for us to make sure that we continue to remember when we read this account in Exodus chapter 16. With that said, if you haven't had the opportunity to read this chapter in the Bible yet, I'm going to invite you to pause right now, read Exodus chapter 16, and that'll help with the rest of the video today. If you have watched or if you have read the account, Exodus chapter 16, then you can continue on with the rest of today's video. So, Exodus chapter 16. We'll start with that question. Who are the characters that we encountered here? Well, we have the whole Israelite community, right? That's what it says, the Israelite community. And we'll talk about the way that they're acting right now. And then we have Moses and Aaron in particular who are singled out. Remember, Moses was the leader of the Israelite community, and his brother Aaron was the high priest. And so these two were the leaders in Israel. And then the Lord is here as well, the Lord God, speaking to Aaron and really carrying out all the different acts that we see here. So, Israelite community, Moses and Aaron, and the Lord. When and where did this happen? Well, this happens during Israel's 40 years of wandering during the time of the Exodus. Remember, the people of Israel had been slaves in Egypt for 400 years. And God had sent Moses to deliver the people, to say, let my people go. And Moses led the people out of Egypt. Well, then some things happen. They end up wandering in the desert, the wilderness, for 40 years. And so that's where we are right now, during this time of the 40 years of wandering in the place called the wilderness, the desert, before the people of Israel actually enter the promised land. What is the problem? And there's really a lot of problems going on here. First, the Israelites were grumbling and complaining about their food. They were saying to Moses and to Aaron, why'd you take us out of Egypt to bring us out here? It would have been better for us to stay back in Egypt. At least there we had good food, but out here we have nothing. So they're complaining about the food that they have, or the lack of food that they feel like they have. And then another problem that occurs is as the Lord begins to provide food, he told them very specifically how much to take, when to take it, all of these different details. Well, it says that the Israelites took more food at different times than what the Lord had told them to take. So, for example, on the 6th day of the week, they were supposed to take enough for the 6th day and the 7th day, because the 7th day was the day of rest, the Sabbath, and they weren't supposed to work. But some of the people took more than what the Lord God had told them to take. They weren't obeying the Lord's command. They weren't trusting that God was going to provide for them. And so they thought they needed to do more than what God had told them to do. So, how was the problem resolved? Well, when you look at how the Israelites were grumbling and complaining about their food, the Lord provided manna, this bread from heaven, and then quail. He provided meat for the people as well. And then when the Israelites took more food than what the Lord had told them to take, what did God do? The Lord taught the people to trust in Him even when they were resting. Even when they weren't working, God wanted to teach them and show them that He was still going to care for them and provide for them, and that they could trust in Him even when they were resting, even when they were obeying that Sabbath command to not work on the seventh day. And then, what are the most important details for us to make sure that we remember from this account? Well, the Lord provided for His people in this miraculous way as they were in the wilderness, the desert, for those 40 years. Every day for 40 years, God provided for His people. And the Lord provided enough for the people so that they could rest on the Sabbath day. On the sixth day, they went out, they got extra food for the next day. God wanted them to know that when they rested, they could still trust in Him. Even when they weren't working, God was still providing and taking care of them. And then one more important detail that I think it's good for us to take with us is that God told Moses and Aaron to take some of that manna, the bread from heaven, and put it in the Ark of the Covenant to remind the people of Israel what the Lord had provided for them during their time in the wilderness. This was meant to be a lasting thing that the people could look back to and remember and be told again and again how God provided for them every single day as they were wandering around in the wilderness before they were brought into the land of promise. A reminder that God provides and He preserves and He takes care of His people every step of the way that they go through life. So, those are the details, Exodus chapter 16. To get ready for our class, you have your memory work that I've asked you to prepare and get ready. And then I'm going to invite you to look at pages 137 through 147 in your copy of Luther's Small Catechism. You don't have to carefully read it, but at least looking at that will help you get ready for class next time. And then think about an answer to this question: how does God continue to care for us and the rest of the world? How does God the Father use us when it comes to this part of His work? Those are the two big questions we're going to answer and look at next time. I pray this short video has gotten you ready for next class, and I'm looking forward to our time together. Have a great day. Thanks. Bye.